Hello, Rabbi.
Evening, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Okay, okay.
Did you get my little clip I sent you?
I did. I have to admit, I have not taken a look at it yet, but I hope
Oh,
to.
I think you'll get a kick out of it.
Okay, okay, that sounds good. I appreciate it. I'm gonna try to do a couple quick things just for me to be set up as best I can so that I've got a commentary to look at one side and all that good stuff. But it is really great to be back again, studying the Tehillim, the Psalms. And, we are meeting obviously right now, and then we will meet again next week. Not normally how we do things, but, we try the best we can. Um, in terms of November, what I have down is November 10th and the 24th as the next two times. Now, with the 10th, I'm going to be in town, but there's actually going to be a meeting that I need to attend. It starts at 7. I can probably be a little late to it, so we can probably get in most of a session on the 10th. But I would say that even though I'm going to be in town, it probably wouldn't be an in-person class. So we would just do Zoom. Even though I'm in Knoxville, we would just do Zoom.
You could
Uh,
also do it a little early if you wanted to. Start a little earlier.
Yeah, I mean, we can,
Uh,
especially since we're now, doing this on YouTube, especially now that
Right,
we are also doing that. If people miss, a part of it or something like that, you can always
right,
catch up or what
right,
have you.
right.
So, all right, so we'll take a look. We'll see what we can do there. But for now, I could definitely say, obviously, right now, and then next week we will meet again. Um, and it is. I hope everybody obviously had good Chagim, good holidays, and are heading as I like to say, heading head first into Cheshvan. Cheshvan is the new Jewish month that will start this week, and it is known many times as Mar Cheshvan, meaning the bitter month of Cheshvan. Why bitter? It's because unlike the previous month where we had holidays coming out of the air, Cheshvan, there are no holidays other than, of course, Shabbat.
Right.
So it is for, some people refer to it as Mar Cheshvan. Many rabbis call it Happy Chesh or Happy Cheshvan because it's a little bit of a break from the rest of everything. So, anyway, so I hope that as the Hebrew months turn, everybody's doing okay. Um, we're actually going to be doing a psalm. The last time we did this, I know it might feel like a long time ago, but it was a biggie. It was Psalm 23. And the psalm we're going to do is obviously the next one, 24, which is also a somewhat familiar one if one attends certain types of Jewish services. And by those Jewish services, we're actually in this case referring to a lot of services we've had in recent weeks. This Psalm 24 is the psalm that is sung when we return the Torah to the ark after a Torah reading on days when we read the Torah that do not fall on Shabbat. Okay.
There's,
So we're going to be doing that particular psalm today. And given that Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the major days of Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, I think um, I either sang or had my son sing this particular psalm, I think 7 different days in the last month. So it's, in a sense, it's pretty familiar. And actually, anytime you read the Torah on a weekday. So, for instance, today, I was at Morning Minyan in Charleston, where I live the majority of the time, and indeed, we read Torah on a Monday. We had a minyan, we read Torah, and this psalm came up again. So this is one where it's not always, you know, maybe it's not the most popular among all faith traditions, but certainly to active synagogue attendees, this is a biggie. So let me pull this up. Okay. So let's see. We are Psalm 24. Again, I like the newest translation. It's not to say that others aren't valid or good. I just like to use that as sort of the basis to it, the basis to their discussion. We can always do more than, we can always look at, additional translations from there. So, okay. So, so here we go. There's actually going to be a certain amount of redundancy in this psalm in terms of phrases that will just go over and over again, which might explain one of the reasons why it was appealing for a hymn, for a lack of a better term, that could be said while a Torah scroll or multiple Torah scrolls are paraded around a sanctuary. It, sometimes it helps to have something that you can, easily, grab onto when it comes, it comes to things being musical. So, what if it's all right? Let's see. Okay, sorry. Marcus, could you do the first three verses in English? Would you be willing to do that?
Okay, sure. Of David, a psalm. The earth is God's and all that it holds, the world and its inhabitants. For God founded it upon the ocean, set it on the nether streams. Who may ascend God's mountain? Who may stand in that holy place?
All right, thanks. And by the way, one of my professors in rabbinical school said that uh, that question in verse 3, we could talk, we can and probably will talk about some of the other some of the previous verses, but verse 3 is maybe the ultimate or one of the ultimate questions that the Psalms ask. The Psalms, Psalms as a whole, as a book, they ask that question: who may ascend God's mountain? Who may stand in that holy place? Who, in other words, who is worthy to be in in God's presence? Who among us? And in that sense, it's kind of a, it takes on a bit of the wisdom tradition. And by the wisdom tradition, just as a refresher, um, you're talking about um, essentially matters of advice on life and how to live it, which a number of books spend a good deal of time dealing with it. You're talking about the books of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, even Job to an extent. Those all come from the wisdom tradition. And some of the Psalms are very much part of that, or at least echo similar ideas. So, in other words, the question of who is worthy, what does it take to be close to God? And and this is something that a few psalms down the line, when we get to Psalm 27, another one of the biggies, I would call it. That's another one of those. It's one of those statements of, the one thing I ask for, God, is to be in your presence. In other words, it's this idea of the narrator or the psalmist wants to know the answer to this as well. They want to know if they are among the worthy. So let's bookmark that idea. But this is one of those classic examples also of a lot of creation typology, right? Talking about the creation of the earth and what God, the creation of the universe, or at least in God's shaping of the universe, whether that was the original creation of all existence, depends on your religious interpretation, but this idea of what God has done to shape the universe that we know. And of course, you have this idea right in the beginning: the earth is God's and all that it holds, right? So Robert Alter mentions that the way that this, to notice how this is structured, how verse 1 is structured, he says the cosmological proclamation of this and the next verse looks like an editorial introduction to the structure of question and response that makes up the rest of the psalm. So, in other words, this is a this is a kind of like a lot of rhetorical questions that we're going to get. That's why I wanted to start by talking about verse 3. So it's going to be a lot of these rhetorical questions that go sort of up and down. And so in a sense, that question and answer structure, that's not really part of verses 1 and 2. Verses 1 and 2, at least the way Alter sees them, are really meant to be kind of laying the ground rules, right? Before we do all the questions and answers, we have to establish basic facts. The earth is God's and all that it holds, the world and its inhabitants, right? And now in verse 2, that God is the one who put it there, right? And so Alter's comment is similar to one I made before, that this is one of many psalms that invoke the creation story, harking back to Canaanite mythology of the deity who establishes the world by subduing the threatening power of the sea and setting a firm limit between land and sea. Okay. That, of course, is so what day of the creation is that reference referring to? Subduing the threatening power of the sea, setting a firm limit between land and sea. What day of creation is that? So it's the second day of creation. Yeah, it's day 2, right? And presumably the only reason why it's not on day 1 is because God said on day 1, okay, first we need some lights. But once there were lights, once God could see, or once everybody could see, or whatever it was, that was the first order of business. Was, okay, we got this water, we got this, we have water around, we got land around, and everything, as the second verse of the entire book of Genesis and the entire Bible tells us, the earth was null and void. It was chaos, right? And so God's like, all right, first thing I got to do is put order to the chaos. But the thing I got to do before that is make sure I can see. So that's why light and dark is on day 1. But then the ordering of the space, the ordering of waters and land, that's why it's there. So the idea of making sure is there's light, okay, that's a start. But really, when God starts getting down to business, is this whole managing of the waters and the land. So those are the, no pun intended, the ground rules for this adventure in creation. Then we have verse 3, right? Alter's comment here. These questions and responses, the ones that start here and then will follow in the psalm, as scholarship has long recognized, are liturgical in nature. One can easily imagine a procession of pilgrims ascending the Temple Mount while a chorus chants these questions, perhaps with an antiphonal response. In other words, it's quite possible that people were traveling to the temple, and as I think I've mentioned before, there was an understanding that when you were kind of in the very close vicinity of the temple, like when you were sort of standing out in the courtyard right outside, there was sort of a, for lack of a better term, there was a house band, right? There was a choir singing psalms, right? And so this may have been one where, there was an expectation of back and forth, and where if you knew the lines, right, you could, go back and forth, right? A concert of, like if you've ever gone to a concert of a popular musician where so many people know the words of the song or know a bunch of the words of the song, a musician, all they have to do is, sing the beginning of a song, and then they can, everybody else can kind of sing the rest. I remember when I had the good fortune to see a Billy Joel concert. The last handful of songs were some of his, his big ones, right? It was, Only the Good Die Young, and it was, it was New York State of Mind and Piano Man, right? It was like some of the ones that, like, big time Billy Joel fans, they know these songs, they know the words. And all he had to do the last few songs is just basically start the opening chords and everybody sang along. And I remember thinking to myself, what a great gig. Show up to the arena, have people pay hundreds of dollars to sing your songs to you. Nice work if you can get it. um, but that's how we are with some of the music that we like, that we care about. It just becomes something that we really we sing along to it. So okay, so you have this overall question, right? Who may ascend God's mountain? Who may stand in that holy place? Okay. From there, um, Mary Linda, are you up for reading tonight?
Not tonight. I had my eye treatments this morning and my eyes are back to
Okay.
normal. Yeah. Thanks for
Okay.
asking.
Thought of us. All right, Gilia, would you be so kind? 4, 5, 6.
Anyone who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not taken a false oath by my life or sworn deceitfully, they shall carry away a blessing from God, a just reward from God, their deliverer. Such is the circle of those who turn to you, Jacob, who seek your presence, Selah.
Okay. All right. So you have this question, right? Who may ascend the mountain of God? Who may be in the presence of God? It is these 4 things in verse 4. Clean hands, pure heart, no false oaths, nor sworn deceitfully. Those are the big 4 according to this. And so that's the criteria, right? And when within those 4 things, you have, at least in the last 2, you have 2 of the commandments, right? Not taking a false oath, nor sworn deceitfully, right? Not taking God's name in vain. At least that's how, I would read it. so you have two of the commandments right there, and then you have this sort of nebulous idea of clean hands and a pure heart. Well, how does that get defined? Maybe it's not always understood, but maybe, the idea is that, well, if you do the other 8 commandments, you're probably in good shape. Because hopefully that by taking those commandments seriously, that's you're on your way to general to general purity, if you will. And so they're the winners, right? So the ones who have clean hands and a pure heart, right? And they're the ones who get a blessing. They get a just reward from God. And then now, verse 6 is interesting. There's a difference in the translations. Verse 6. Such is the circle of those who turn to you, Jacob, who seek your presence. Okay, what are we talking about here? The circle. All right. It literally means generation. And that's what altar is going to say. So go ahead. Yes, please. Sorry, you had a question? Okay. So, all right. So such is the circle of those who turn to you. And Jacob, who seek your presence. And so the translation in altar says it a bit differently. This is the generation of God's seekers, those who search out your presence, Jacob. Now, this is a little
That makes sense.
yeah, the translation is a little the Hebrew is a little awkward here, right? Because it's so the translation you have in front of you is like it fudges a little bit, right? Because God in the Hebrew, God goes from being third person to second person.
Mhm.
All right. And the JPS translation essentially just makes it all second person. Now, I am reminded of what one of my teachers said is that there are times where we put a lot of emphasis on first person, second person, third person in biblical text. And there's Professor Stephen Geller, his contention is that it's not as big of a deal as we might think it is. That this is probably a case where where the uses of which person it is done somewhat sloppily, and not that it has no meaning, but it doesn't have nearly the meaning that it does. So I think this is why, or I think this may be a reason why the New Jewish Publication Society translation is like this. It's basically saying, yeah, okay, we're referring to God in third person and then second person in the same verse. It's a little weird. So, but if you look at the context of the rest of the poem, we'll just turn it all to second person, and it probably isn't a big deal. That's the only thing.
Rabbi,
Yeah, please.
It's confusing because, in the translation, of course, it's the you and the your are capitalized. So that to me means that that refers to God.
Yeah.
And Jacob, of course, is a person, and the people Israel, I guess, in this case. And so the question is whether there would have been a better way to place the name of Jacob. so that it's not interfering. The Jacob and the people Israel are interspersed between God and God, right? So
Right.
and so it would have been, it would be clearer if Jacob could be either before or after that. And but I don't know how to do that. I was looking at the Hebrew, and that's not helpful either in that respect.
The Hebrew is very, very, very terse.
Yes, very.
7 words.
Right.
But Gilia, you're right. With Jacob, wait, it looks like to you, Jacob is you're
Right.
yes.
That's not what is meant. It's to you. And it's Jacob who is turning to God, right? Jacob is one of
Right.
us in the circle. Is that right, Rabbi?
Yeah. So I'll read again the Alter translation because he does it differently. It says, "This is the generation of his seekers, those who search out your presence, comma, Jacob." I'm not saying that's better. I'm just saying that that's sort of a different way of doing it.
And he capitalizes your as well, I imagine. Does he do
Actually,
that?
he does not actually.
Uh-huh.
It is sort of a bit ambiguous. I mean, it
It
says
is. It is.
Apaneach Yaakov. So
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Exactly.
How do you how do you sort of what does the you point to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it
Yeah.
point to God? Does it point to Jacob? I mean,
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
ambiguous.
And what also doesn't help, at least in terms of the ambiguity here, is that you throw this word Selah at the end. Now, Selah, um, the way I understand the word Selah is it's the biblical text, or at least the biblical poetry text's way of saying yeehaw or woohoo, woohoo. I kind of see it like that. You know, like rock on. I don't know. I mean, like it kind of has that idea where it's an exclamatory word that doesn't necessarily, add much more than the idea of yeah, yeah, right. Um, I also but the reason why I mention that is I also wonder whether, and this is this is my guess here, is that the fact that you have Yaakov Selah, I almost wonder whether it's like whether Yaakov is also part of that exclamation, meaning the Hebrew is Zedor Dorshav Mivakshe Fanecha, and then Yaakov Selah, like, yeah, Jacob.
Well, I have no idea what the Hebrew says, but look at my what is it 1910 version of JP, 1917 version. It
Sure.
makes a lot more sense because at the end it just says uh uh that face that seek that face, even Jacob, the Shalah. That makes a whole lot more sense that this says even Jacob. That makes a more sense than the new one.
Uh,
I don't know what the Hebrew says exactly, but the English makes a whole lot more sense.
No, I hear that. I hear that. So sorry. Will say again what your translation says with that.
Okay, it says, such is the generation of them that seek after him with a capital H, that they seek thy with a capital T, even Jacob, Shalah.
Hmm.
That makes a whole lot more sense than these newer translations.
And I don't know the grammar I don't know Hebrew grammar, but Yaakov comes just before Selah.
Yeah.
So
Right.
This is we could maybe argue that
I mean,
yeah.
poetry is very, very difficult to translate, even
Hmm.
if you translate modern poetry from one modern language and another. And if there are now 2,500 years between or so, uh, um,
What does the
make it
Hebrews
easier.
actually say? All these different translations. How do y'all interpret the Hebrew?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I guess like, look in terms of a literal translation, the Alter translation, this is the one that I quote that's not in front of you, is probably more um, dedicated to a literal understanding of it. That's not to say that it makes it better than other translations, because there are certain there are plenty of times where a text really does need to be understood colloquially, as opposed to, absolutely, sort of, exactly literally.
Well,
But
how do you translate that?
how would I translate it? Noting that I'm not a scholar, noting that I'm not a scholar on the level of the other translators, this is the generation of the ones who drash, of the ones who, this is the generation of the ones who seek or interpret.
Mhm.
Those who seek out your face, right, to be literal, panecha, your face, Jacob Selah. And what I would suggest is that it's that, in other words, that if you were to put a, punctuation, like modern English punctuation, you'd say Zed or Dorshav, Mivakshe Fanecha, colon, Yaakov Selah. That's how I would do it, right? That this is the generation of seekers, the ones who seek out your face, Jacob Selah, right? And maybe this is an argument that Jacob was actually in on sort of a side gig. He was a really good entrepreneur. He was a bestseller.
I think your use,
Yeah, I know that's pretty terrible.
I think
So
I think your use of the word face is more powerful than turn to you.
yeah, could be. Yeah, I think that that's fine. I mean, and there are plenty of times where, listen, um, the fact that, fanecha, literally panecha really means, your face, and oftentimes the response I get is, but God doesn't have a face. To which I say, really? In that, if you look at the biblical text, there is a whole lot of there's a very good argument to make that God is not some invisible being. Now, maybe God is a being that does not wish to show um, God's body to humanity, but it's not that God lacks form. It's not that God is amorphous, as some modern theology sometimes purports, at least according to the Bible, or at least if we were to take the Bible's words. There are plenty of times where it talks about God's arm and God's foot and, God's back. I mean, there are plenty of references, and if you want to argue theologically, okay, that's all metaphorical. Okay, I mean that's you can make that argument. But the idea that uh, God is, that God does not have a body, I think um, it's a very specific um, understanding of theology, not necessarily supported by the biblical text. I'll put it that way. Um, so anyway, so you have this idea, right? This is the circ. These are the people who are worthy of God's presence, right? There are people who seek God's presence, right? In other words, they're looking for God, right? These are not people who they're not people who don't really care whether they get to see God or not. They're people who seek, right? And they seek God, and they also are of clean hands and pure hearts, right? So they are worthy because they want to be in God's presence, and they also are qualified to do so according to the text. So that's where we are in terms of that overall question. Now we're going to have have a little bit more of the question and answer thing. So let's see. Richard, would you be willing to read 7, 8, 9?
Sure. O gates, lift up your heads. Up high, you everlasting doors, so the King of glory may come in. Who is the King of glory? God, mighty and valiant, God, valiant in battle. O gates, lift up your heads, lift them up, you everlasting doors, so the King of glory may come in.
I want to tell this little story. I hope it's okay. So, in addition to this being the psalm that we uh, say when we are returning a Torah scroll on a day that is not Shabbat, this is also designated as the psalm of the day for Sunday. And at Sunday morning minyan at the synagogue I used to serve in Charleston, there was this delightful woman who was, I think in her 90s, and she would come to minyan, every Sunday. And, I mean, that was just part of her routine. She'd come at 9 a.m. minyan. Um, and she was typically the person who led this psalm responsively on a Sunday. She just got that honor. And so, and it was a different translation than what we have. And I just remember she just had this little voice and this, lovely accent. And she'd go, "The earth and its grandeur belong to Adonai." Like Adonai, right? And then we'd get to this part in verse 7 and again in verse 9, where it says, "O gates, lift up your heads," right? And the way it was translated in the prayer book we were using at the time, it would say, "Lift high your lintels, O you gates." And she would go, "Lift high your lintels." So, I was wondering whether she was, advertising for veganism. I'm not sure. Interested in a good lentil soup. I don't know, but I remember it fondly. I hope there's fondness that's coming through from that.
Reb, I think Linda wants to get in. I just saw her post something. Did
Oh,
you see-
okay. Is she
No,
not?
I'm in. I just sent a chat that I'm sorry I'm late. I forgot.
It's okay. It's okay. Glad to have you when you can. No problem. So let's see. All right, the numbering got a little messed up here, but it's okay. We're fine. Right. So okay. Anyway, so I just have this lovely, remembrance of this. Now, here's the thing. Why are we all of a sudden talking to the gates? Right? According to Alter, he says scholarly consensus views verses 7 through 10, in other words, the three we have here plus one more, as an originally separate poem. It is formally linked with the previous poem by the liturgical questions and responses, but now the questions are directed not to the moral fitness of worshipers coming up the Temple Mountain, but rather to the identity of the King of Glory who is entering the gates of the temple. Right? In other words, like before you're asking, who is worthy of God's presence? Now the question is, who is the monarch of glory? Who is the King of Glory? Right? Alter goes on to say, many scholars have proposed that this second set of questions refers to a different procession in which the Ark of the Covenant is brought into the temple. If, in fact, the Ark was sometimes carried out to the battlefield, as it is in the early chapters of the first book of Samuel, That would provide a special motivation for the reference here to God as a warrior, where it says that you see, who is the King of glory, God mighty and valiant, God valiant in battle. So what's happening here is that we have gone from a psalm of who is worthy of God's presence. In other words, who are the right kind of people that are deserving of of satisfaction based on their morality, to then saying, okay, but who is God? Right? Who is, and which is a different question. And it's answered with, right, the king of glory is God, who is strong and is especially valiant in battle. Who said we were going to battle? Right? It does feel a bit different. And so I do think that Alter's suggestion here makes makes a bit of sense, is at least logical, that this really is a separate poem, but it was linked because it also has a question and answer, sort of a call and response. And I do want to mention this again, right? Because in this last verse, which we didn't read out loud, but I'll just do it here real quick. Who is the sovereign of glory? God of hosts is truly the sovereign of glory, Selah. So we've gone from, again, who is worthy of being near God to who is God. And we also notice that we have two almost identical verses, right? And it's a little mislabeled here, but you see at the top of your screen right now, "O gates, lift up your heads up high, you everlasting doors, so the King of glory may come in." And then at the bottom of your screen, you see, "O gates, lift up your heads, lift them up, you everlasting doors, so the King of glory may come in." Almost the same, which is kind of a normal thing we have in songs that are meant to be sung out loud. We have refrains. We have choruses that sometimes have identical language, choruses that sometimes have, words that are generally the same, but with a couple of different, with a couple of differences here and there, but you can still tell it's the chorus. So this is another suggestion that this is a chant. And then we have here now, who is the King of glory, God mighty and valiant, God valiant in battle? And then, who is the King of glory, God of hosts, is truly the King of glory, Selah. Regarding this last verse, Alter says, in this repetition of verse 8, the pronoun of he, right, or the Hebrew word who, is added for climactic emphasis, whereas the Lord of armies is kind of a generalizing substitution for most potent and valiant in battle. Whether or not this second part of the psalm was framed to celebrate a ceremonial bearing of the ark into the temple, it clearly envisages a triumphant return of God as warrior God to God's terrestrial abode. So now let's, if it's okay, let's kind of take a look at the psalm sort of as a whole, right? Which really are two main kind of psalms, or two, ideas in terms of in terms of it. And actually, maybe you could say three, because it starts with the creation talk, or at least the establishment that the earth belongs to God. God created it, or God formed it in the form that we now experience. Then it's a question of morals, right? A question of, or at least of, personal worth, right? The one who upholds certain commandments and has this overall idea of clean hands and a pure heart. And then the question of who is God? Well, God is a great warrior. And then this idea here, and this is where I think this is perhaps where the psalm goes full circle because of the phrase, and this is my theory. So you can feel free to argue and dismiss it. But my theory is that Mihu ze melech hakavod Adonai tzvaot. Who is the King of Glory? God of hosts. This phrase Adonai tzvaot, which is translated here as God of hosts. Now, what do we mean by hosts? I always found this phrase very bizarre. I remember, seeing this translation, when I was a kid and thinking to myself, okay, God of hosts, does that mean the God of Phil Donahue and Oprah Winfrey? They're talk show hosts, right? What do you mean the God of hosts? And okay, so we're not necessarily talking about them. We are talking about the God, by the hosts, we are talking about the heavenly host, meaning the celestial beings, meaning the sun, moon, and the stars, if you will. That's what we're talking about when we're saying the God of hosts.
So that goes back to creation then.
Exactly. So in this way, we have gone full circle. Because at the beginning of the poem, we said, the earth and its grandeur belong to Adonai. God formed it. And now, who's the one in charge now? It's that very same God who is Lord of not only this earth that we have, but everything around it. So that, I think, in a sense, helps to make this it provides, I think, more logical bookends to the whole thing. I guess the question I'd like to pose to you is, in what ways does this work, or maybe you could argue doesn't work, as a song that we sing when we are walking around with the Torah scroll? Why would you think that this is appropriate, or why would you argue it's maybe not so appropriate to sing this as we are returning the Torah scroll to the ark?
Well, your discussion of this last verse, then that makes sense.
Okay.
When you talk about that God of creation.
Okay.
Well, I've always enjoyed it very much when we return the Torah because opening the gates is opening the ark, right?
Mm.
And we put the Torah scrolls back in the ark, and the thing is complete.
Right.
So I've always thought it was fitting. So, and I
So,
love
yeah.
the psalm anyway. This part of the psalm. So.
Well, when I was a kid, I always thought the God of hosts meant armies.
Oh,
Oh, it does.
Okay,
okay.
that's where I guess I got it from somewhere. And it
Sure.
seems like that this part of this last part reminds me when I was going through in the army, basic training in the jump school. We sang songs. There were army marching songs, airborne running songs and stuff. And now I think back of it, we were like gorillas standing up on our hind legs, pounding on their chest, showing how strong and mighty we are and who we are, be afraid of us. And this is like, to me, I mean, the think of your character's horror, like, but to stand down because God's on our side.
Mhm.
And this is like showing, I think of a much more militant nature when I see what the English is.
So I appreciate that. So in other words, it's like because right. So to see Tsivaot as not necessarily, or at least in addition to the possibility that it could be heavenly bodies, but also the like a military body, if you will. Um,
And Will,
and
yeah,
yeah.
what Will just said my father was in artillery in World War II, and they had a song, but I guess thinking back, I thought in terms of them marching in unison. I guess somehow it was a marching
It's
sort of
the
melody.
caissons go rolling on, and
Yeah, that's
the
it. Yeah,
army stole it from the artillery to make it the army song and change the words. But when I was probably about the seventh or eighth grade, we learned all of them except for the Coast Guard, which I ended up finally being in because I guess we didn't know that the foreign defense schools didn't know the Coast Guard existed, but that was the caisson song
yeah,
in
and I
World
hadn't
War
thought
II.
about that in a while. Yeah, thank you. Interesting.
Rabbi,
Hmm.
on
Yeah.
the in verse 9 it says, "So the King of Glory may come in." What is the Hebrew word that's translated as may, and does it have other meanings?
So the may is kind of implied. So if you look at the Hebrew, like the Yavo Melech HaKavod, um, so a way to look at it is so that the King of Glory, um, like it's not it's not that like that you have to lift up the gates or else the king can't come in. It's almost like make way for the king, right? Make way, meaning the king's going to come in whether whether you like it or not. So you might as well get out of the way. It's kind of the
Well,
sense of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
because if I remember correctly, the King James version of
Mhm.
this says, "Lift up your heads, O you gates, and be ye lifted up, you everlasting doors, so the King of Glory shall come in."
Hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say will, it's the same as will come in, because God will come in. Uh,
Right,
I mean,
right, and
it
it's almost
is
like
it is the imperfect form, the Yavo.
yeah.
So it,
Yeah.
it just makes me think of adulation, like heads. He's coming. Lift your heads up.
Yeah. Mhm.
You everlasting doors. He's coming.
Uh, yeah, yeah. I think that's the idea. Not that okay, if we can't get the gates open, that
Right,
the king's going to be stuck.
right.
It's more like he's coming. So
Hmm.
if you know what's good for you, you
If
know.
you don't want your gates tore down, you're open them.
Exactly. Because
Rabbi,
yeah,
does a Vayavo mean coming?
oh,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
so
Mhm. Go ahead.
Yavo is the imperfect form of to come. So
Mhm.
he um, oh, he will come. He is coming. So it's imperfect. It's not finished yet. And the v is the conjunction, usually in and, but especially in earlier languages, this the can do very heavy lifting in lots of different meanings.
Oh, thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So, yeah, any other thoughts or questions about this psalm? It's a fun one to sing, especially having the verses that are almost the same make it a little easier sometimes to sing.
I think I may like your translations better than this one.
That's fair. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And
All good.
it's interesting. I mean, when I was when I was first learning, Bible at the seminary, I mean, one of the things that our professor encouraged us to do was to make our own translations, or at least suggest our own translations, back it up with evidence, back it up with why you're choosing this understanding, and and kind of wrestle with it, and but don't take any one translation as this is this is the only way to see it. This is the only way to understand it.
Back
So
to, back to Marcus's comment about the difficulty and challenges of translating poetry from one language to another, which our friend Marilyn Callett is always doing and struggling with.
absolutely, absolutely. So we anyway, so that's Psalm 24, and I figure, come back next week and we'll start the next one. How about that?
Great.
Hey, Rabbi, I just wanted to say that Jason forgot to tell you that I couldn't make the Judaism 101 on Sunday.
Okay, the link should be up pretty soon, so you can catch up as you need.
Okay. I know it's
And
about Shabbat. I know about some of it since you mentioned at the sukkah. Like,
All good.
what is your second November date? I got the 11th, but
The 10th and the 24th.
24th. Okay.
November
Thanks.
10th and 24th. Okay.
November 10th, November 24th. So I'll give you an update on the timing of the one on November 10th next week. So hopefully we'll have the
Oh,
idea.
might be a different time. When are you going to be
Yeah.
in town again?
I get back to town November 4th, and I'll be in from the 4th to the 11th.
Oh, okay. After the Shabbat. Okay, thanks.
Yes, no worries. All right. Everybody have a good evening and
Yep.
enjoy, and we'll see you next week.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Thank